when you have a figure on space or a few things, having a small filler stitch is really a handy thing. I think you've seen me use these little thread beads on a lot of things. It just gives you a nice space filler and an easy decoration, and it's a good way to connect if you have more than one thing going on. It kind of, I don't know, it creates a flow between the elements and makes them touch somehow, even though there's still space in between. So, I mean, a thread bead is really, for me, a substitute for the French knot, which some of you might be familiar with. And it's just a lot simpler to execute, and it actually wears a lot better than a French knot. So here I've got two different elements here, and I've actually put a few in between because it starts to give them a relationship. But all a thread bead is just stitching in place over and over again. You can do them free form, but sometimes I'll just draw myself a guide. And I'm using 2 strands of embroidery thread here. You can use 2 or 3 or more, depending. Sometimes it's hard to get more than 2 or 3 strands through the cloth. You just come up from the back and take a tiny stitch. If you have that drawing there, you can just cover it. And just stitch in place, going all the way through, until you build it up. I mean, you can change the direction of a little bit here and there to round it out. I usually take about 4 stitches, sometimes more. Then just go over to the next dot, and you get a nice smooth raised surface that doesn't have any catch to it. You know, in other words, it's not going to pull or anything, so it's very sturdy. Now, you don't have to make them all the same size, but it's a kind of a form of stippling. And I just use them a lot. They're simple. And they just add a little something to the empty space. And they're also a way to connect things, which I think is important. And when you end them off, you can just go to the back and take an extra stitch before you cut it off. So if you want to take it one step further, I have another little technique that I like to use. You know, these dots right now are random, but you can also organize them in some sort of way. And what I do a lot of times is I create a mask, and I create the mask out of cloth because it could be used over and over again. It could be even used in another project, unlike paper where you tend to waste it. Anyway, you make yourself a mask. Can be any shape. I'm just using a moon type shape here because it's appropriate. And you can kind of frame an area that you might want to fill in with stitch. Now you could center your motif, or you can simply use it to connect 2 things. And what you would do then is draw your dots in. I mean, you can pin this down to keep it in place. I use safety pins sometimes. Draw a whole bunch of little dots in. Try to draw around the edge so that you catch the shape really sharply. And then you'll fill it in with stitch. Now I've got one here that I've already, I had this laid over here like this. And these dots are drawn now, and what I'm going to do, I've already stitched a couple of them. You can see where they're darker. I'm going to fill in this kind of, I call this the snow globe effect. Kind of gives you a field of texture and color that you can use to either give interest to the background or to actually sort of connect the elements and make them touch, like I had mentioned before. So I'll stitch that up and show you how that looks.